Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome to the stream. I think I got everything set up now, and I think we are ready to go. Let me know if you guys can hear me alright, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. We're going to be working on our character's hair, and essentially creating some stylized curls in these locks. I have kind of a block out of a bunch of different pieces here that I really have not given much love since I kind of put them in. But yeah, we're going to be focusing on that. We're going to be working on this concept. I had to mention this at the start of every stream here. Concept by D-Dino. Go give him a follow. There's a link down in the description. Awesome concept artist. I really can't speak enough about how great of an artist they are. Really cool stuff. Huge fan, which is of course why we're sculpting this character. Also, go check out my Gumroad if you like some of the free stuff I do. And you might see some new stuff on there. I have decided that I would like to try to do some mentorships. I'm going to do a very limited number of available ZBrush mentorships for sculpting. So if that is something that interests you, if you like some of my free content, if you like my live streams, go check that out. If you like this stuff, I guarantee you'll like that. A lot more higher quality stuff over there, as well as some new things as well. But welcome everybody, welcome to the stream, welcome Hudman, welcome Cristiano, and everybody else that's just kind of popping in here as we just started. For those that are just kind of coming in, we're going to be sculpting on our hair, as I was just saying, working on doing some more stylization. We've got kind of a lot of blending and stuff going on in our concept over here. Let me move that. Puck. Oh, whoops. A lot of stylization in this. A lot of stuff kind of blending together. So I've done as best as I could during my blockout phase to kind of interpret some of that. We're definitely going to have to fill in some of these gaps. But one of the major things that I would like to do is start to get in this, not actually kind of create curls for the hair. Maybe. I have an idea of how we could do that in a really cool way. But mainly what I want to attempt to do is get just the idea of curls in this hair. So I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. We can just kind of solo mode on one of these strands. We'll just grab this one up front. Let's also toggle off the poly paint just so it's not quite as dark. It's a little bit easier to see and work on here. And we can go ahead and grab, I'll just use the damn standard brush since you guys are probably really familiar with that one. And let's get an extra subdiv in here. And also, if you guys don't mind, let me know if the music's a little too loud. I turned it down from our last stream, so hopefully it's not too invasive on us. But yes, come in here. I have a flat color material applied, so it's going to mess with my poly paint on my face, so it's going to look a little bit darker. No worries. Let's just toggle off. Yeah, we'll just leave it on. So what we're going to do, what my idea is that I have for how we can do this, let's form this shape a little bit better. Maybe round this out some more. Just make sure that this is reading well from all of our different angles. And then come through again with the damn standard brush. And what I want to try to do, it's a little bit strong. Let's try lowering our Z intensity some. That was strange. I'm not sure why that first stroke was so strong there. But yeah, we're gonna kind of come through with our damn standard brush. Make a mark or two. Neighbor's dog's going crazy outside. Essentially, I just want to not do a ton of strokes, really just a few. Something like this. And then come back through and start to work on this form a little bit more. This could maybe, you know, be a little bit more straight here, kind of get in line with the other ones a bit better. So let's try something like that. So I don't know if this is going to work yet, the way I imagined it in my head, but we're going to try. So then from there, I could come through and kind of mask off and maybe inflate different parts of this. I would like to maybe just try pinching in some of this form. Maybe even harder than that. Let's just try to push it really far at first and just kind of see how this is reading. And coming through. Start to see how that's looking. It's not affecting the silhouette all the way around. I might just have to kind of completely, if I want to go with this look, if I want to try to do something like this, I might have to kind of completely go through and spiralize the entire thing, kind of wrap these around to connect. The idea here is just to start blocking in this shape, maybe smooth it out a little too much. But I want to get these pretty strong transitional places here. So we got that kind of V dip in, so that it affects our silhouette nicely. The problem with the way I've done this, and the reason I'm not really wanting to go all the way around, is because most of the pieces of hair, these tubes that I have in here, are not fully visible, right? The back side of that's not visible, and it's not going to be visible by the time I get done moving stuff around. But yeah, so I don't want to do a ton of extra work. Another idea I had was actually going through with like a tube of geometry and wrapping that around each piece. It's another idea. I don't know. Let's play around with some other stuff and see kind of what we can do here. I'm going to start by kind of fixing some of our hair, as there's quite a few gaps that I'm noticing, and I'd like to get our hair in a little bit of a better place. So let's start doing that. And if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to throw them up in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those. The way I've kind of created this hair is I had just a single insert mesh that I duplicated and reshaped for all of these. I did the same thing even with this front piece of hair, which is the most unique out of them, just because I've spent a little bit more time on that recently. But yeah, for the most part, it's all pretty similar. I might need to come through here and just inflate everything, almost everything, just to help clean up a lot of these gaps. Just depending on what angle you look at this from, a bunch of gaps going on. Another way I can kind of fill in some of those, I actually already tried this, is creating a proxy mesh that I could deflate and then fit inside of the hair just a little bit so that it closed off some of these holes. It ended up not working super well though, so I don't want to really go that route. So probably just kind of coming through, inflating each one of these individually. Get it to a much cleaner place than we have it right now. And when I say inflate, I'm not talking about actually using like the inflate brush or the inflate tool down in the deformation palette. We can absolutely use those for certain areas, but for the most part, I'm gonna manually tweak this stuff just so I have more control over the look and feel of everything. I would, you know, I'm fine with. It's totally fine to use stuff that's gonna make it easier on us. Like if I want to come down in the deformation palette and let's just say inflate everything by, whoops, undo that. Inflate by like, let's just throw in 25 there. It's like, yeah, that's great, but now there's a lot of stuff that you know, I can't see every single thing that's happening here. And 25, at least for this mesh, isn't that much, and it's filling in the holes somewhat, but so many pieces of this hair are starting to blend together. I really don't want to mess with that too much. So let's try that and kind of keep working here as we blend some more of this stuff. Problem with round hair, and that's why I'm starting to kind of twist and tilt these ends of the hair so they're not all facing the same way. The problem with round hairs, if you kind of line up cylinders all in the same place, you're always going to have gaps. So that's why I'm trying to make some of different length and different shapes and sizes, just to have a little bit more variation there and help close off those holes. I want to avoid too much of this blending together of the hair. And I also want to, for the most part, try to kind of plane off the ends of each one of these chunks, just so it has like a nice flat kind of termination point. It doesn't need to be, you know, planar, but it needs to be at least transitioning into that kind of soft flat there. And then I can kind of fill in and adjust the shape of all these because they're pretty rough. All this is pretty rough. Hair is another tough thing to sculpt. Much like hands. We were working on hands yesterday, if you were around for that. Today is hair day. This hair in particular, I don't think is as hard as what you might think of for traditionally kind of going through and sculpting hair. Just because sculpting hair, a lot of people have trouble with the texture and just like the kind of larger shapes and the flow of hair. I think that's what's more difficult about sculpting hair. It's kind of like trying to sculpt water in a way. Cloth is also very similar. This is more of individual shapes that I'm going through and adjusting. When I'm working on, you know, sculpting hair though, I kind of take it in the same type of process. I'm always breaking stuff off and splitting things up into different subtools. Just my workflow. What else? What else, guys? What's going on? What's going on with you? Craig's here. Craig just popped in. Welcome to the stream, Craig. Is anybody working on anything cool today? It doesn't have to be ZBrush. I know HUD Boy likes to listen while he's at work. I can only assume that he's at work right now. I'm sure he's working on something very fun. So I'm using my transpose tool, if you guys don't know, because I have a bunch of different polygroups in here. Some people that are a little bit newer to ZBrush might not know. But if you use your transpose tool or your 3D gizmo, you can control tap on polygroups and it will auto select that polygroup and mask off everything else. It just makes it nice and easy for you to quickly go through and tweak one object if you have separate objects like I do, separate meshes, all in one subtool, which is my hair over here. So it just makes it nice and easy and fast to do that. It's pretty handy. A lot better than splitting everything off into its own subtool and then trying to organize, I don't know, 30 pieces of hair? I don't know how many I have here. 3, 6, maybe like 30, I'd say. Not gonna sit here and count though. That'd be a pain to organize though, and try to flip through over here in my subtool list. I like to try to keep things as kind of condensed as possible. Even when I'm splitting, you know, things out into 100 pieces. Condense it as much as you can. Just try to make it easier on yourself. Hudman is working as usual, nailed it. He's got to do some refactoring on the code he's working on. Going back through some old code. Sounds like a blast. Good luck with that. I'm refactoring my hair, you could say. improving on it, so. My coding is done with a pen. It's a lot more fun in my opinion. Although I think the thing that's really cool and interesting about coding is that it's just another language that you get to learn and play with. And I'm really interested in different languages. For instance, I like me some Japanese, but if you're working in C++ or whatever, it's the exact same in my opinion. Same basic idea at least. I was always terrible at languages in school until I started self-studying language that I was actually interested in. I used to, in college in high school I took Spanish and I hated it. In college I took Italian because I have Italian heritage. But it wasn't until I kind of started learning Japanese on my own that it really clicked for me and I actually enjoyed it, and took a Japanese class at school as well, which at that point was kind of a waste because I had already learned all the basics and everything. And then I went on a study abroad trip, and here we are now, almost 5 years later. This is not wanting to get whiter for me. Might split this one off and remesh it just to clean it up. Another way that I kind of like to block out texture, since we were kind of looking at that before, is just using something like your clay tubes brush. The clay tubes brush has so many different uses, but even for just kind of getting some texture in there, if you're trying to, get the idea of curls, we wouldn't want them to be so straight up and down. We'd want to get some directionality to them, but even for something like that, I think it can be very helpful in at least blocking out those forms and just kind of breaking up our shapes, since most of these are kind of pretty uniform, but we'll look more at that after we do some more cleanup here and get this hair to a little bit of a better place. Oh boy, let's see, let me refresh this page real quick, it's stuck on me. Want to get back into 3D stuffs, getting some stuff worked out to start a game dev project. Sounds like a lot of fun. Refactoring hair sounds like more fun, yeah. Any recommendations on that, on getting back into 3D? I actually do want to learn Japanese, and although any recommendations on that? I'm not sure if you're talking about Japanese or 3D. I want to learn Japanese, and although I've started multiple times, I fell out of it and struggled while I was on it. Yeah, I don't know, Japanese is, I don't know, I think Japanese is kind of a tough language to learn for a European language. Well, maybe not all European languages, but I think most have a relatively similar grammar structure. Anything that has a similar grammar structure to English, any native speaker of that language, I think it's going to be tough to learn Japanese. Just because their grammar is completely backwards, and verbs are pretty much always at the end of the sentence, and I don't know, it's just really hard to get in that mindset. At least it was for me, and going to Tokyo and being in a class where the only common language among everybody there at this study abroad program was Japanese. So there were students from all over the world, and everybody spoke different languages, and there were maybe like 2 other people in my class that spoke English. So and not even like great English. They weren't like native speakers. So that definitely helped, because it kind of forced me into situations where, you know, I had to speak Japanese almost all the time. Definitely when I was in class, you weren't allowed to speak anything except for Japanese. So immersion definitely helps, but it doesn't really sound like you have that option. Most people, I don't think, do. That's kind of why I did it when I was in school, because I knew it would be my only chance. Man, I don't know. My friends are really into Japanese. I have a couple friends that are really into Japanese as well, and they use Tofugu as a resource. It's a website, so you might want to check that out. There's also like the Genki books, but they're kind of just for, you know, intro to grammar. I don't know how intense those get. I believe that there's only like 2 or 3 of them at the most. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's something that you have to devote a ton of time to, for sure. And that's kind of why I stopped studying Japanese. I still do really enjoy the language, and if I had a friend that spoke fluent Japanese, that would be awesome. I would love that, just to be able to speak with them and practice and learn. Because I still do remember a lot of my Japanese, but I literally have no one to speak with. Even my friends that speak Japanese don't really speak that often. And for people like them that just kind of study Japanese on their own, they're still not really great at speaking Japanese and kind of being in the mindset of thinking in Japanese. A lot of the time when you're speaking with someone in another language that's different from your native, you're kind of trying to convert everything on the fly. Okay, how do I say this and you're like doing that in your head, and that's not the way you want to do it. You want to get to a point where you just hear the word and you understand like the base meaning of that, and you're able to kind of think in that language is how I would word it. But that sounds like, I wouldn't say like that I was necessarily thinking in Japanese, but I was able to understand meaning for a word without I was able to understand and like repeat back and have a conversation in Japanese without trying to convert everything to English. So that makes it a lot easier and faster and more natural. But people that just kind of study and don't have a lot of conversational practice, I think that's the main hump to get over. Not in Canada, no immersion for sure. If you help me learn, I'd be down to be a Japanese speaking buddy, dude. Yeah, like I said, I remember some, probably not enough to be a teacher, for sure, I would say. Be a pretty awful Japanese teacher. I can still read hiragana and katakana just fine, but, you know, when I stopped studying Japanese, I knew somewhere around like 200 kanji, to the point where I could write them from memory, which I felt like was pretty good for, you know, where I was. But now I just forget all of that. Hiragana and katakana is like pretty easy, and I probably couldn't even write hiragana and katakana from memory right now perfectly. I could write a lot of it, but there would be like some gaps. Like I'd probably forget like a character or two. But if I saw it, I can read it. I can absolutely read it. Really, I never really cared about writing too much. It was more about speaking for me, and it still is. So I'm more interested in the speaking and just being able to converse with people. I don't care about reading Japanese. I don't know how that would be of any use to me. Also, you know, writing, not much use to me as well. But speaking and listening, for sure, that's definitely a skill that I would still love to work on. Oh, yeah, but Japanese, it's good stuff. still kind of trying to clean up our hair. We got lots of bad stuff. So what I'm trying to avoid as I kind of plane these hair tubes out is this kind of look. Let me go profile here. So we have a nice flat, right? That's fine, but we have this curve down into a flat, into another curve. So instead what I want is pretty much just like a straight kind of cut off on the cylinder. So what I've been doing is kind of just pushing out the edges, trying to get those to be a little bit wider. Just going through all these. There's some other ways I can kind of clean these up as well. There's just kind of a lot of these, and I'm trying to look for the ones that are the worst offenders here, such as this one. Oh. Got some weird masking going on there. I think occasionally you can get a mask on one of your subtools and it'll be masked off, but you won't be able to see the mask. And it's a problem with, let me see if I can get it to do it. It's a problem with masking. Wait, let me see. Did that work? Okay, so yeah, I did get it to do it. So I can move this with my move brush, right? But I can't move this. And that's because these are all masked, but it's not telling me. And the reason that is, let me like draw a mask here, and then you'll see that the mask all comes back. So the bug here, what causes this, is if, let's say I have this and it's masked, right? And then I come in here, or actually, let's mask everything except for that. And then I come in here and I mask it off, and then I clear my mask by clicking and dragging on the canvas. It'll clear the mask here, and it'll also look like it cleared the mask here, but it's actually still masked, so if that makes sense. I can move this, but I can't move everything else because it is secretly still masked. So that can happen on occasion, so be on the lookout for that one. It's a fun little bug. Yeah, so I kind of do that often. And when stuff is not moving the way I need it to, that's typically the cause. Alright, so I say, how can we do this? How can we get kind of this spiral shape? Let's take this piece here, delete hidden. Let's try experimenting on this one. So we kind of did a quick little experiment here. I say we try one on this piece now. See what we can do. So is that the cause? Is that the cause by unmasking when you're in solo mode? Because that's what it looks like, and it would be good to know how to avoid it. It is not solo mode, no. It is instead selecting a mesh. So these are all polygroups. This is all one subtool. I'm in solo mode just because I'm looking at just this mesh. So if I select this purple polygroup, or let's say I mask off everything but this purple polygroup, and then I clear that mask, right? It clears all my masks, that's fine. I can work on everything just fine. It's all unmasked. But if I have everything masked here, or it doesn't even have to be everything. Like let's go through here and unmask some of this stuff. So these are masked, these parts are unmasked. And then I Control-Shift-Click to select a polygroup, so everything's hidden now. And then I Control-Click and drag and unmask everything on this polygroup. So that's all unmasked now, right? I just unmasked all that. And then I Control-Shift-Click on my canvas to go back to all my polygroups in this subtool. And now it looks like everything is unmasked, but if I try to work on that stuff, it's not doing anything. And that's because you can see there when I'm using my move brush, it's still masked. It's just not showing it. So if I click, Control-Click, drag, and draw a new mask, you'll see that it is still masked. It's just, it wasn't showing it for some reason. Not sure why it does that, but it does, and it is annoying. So let's do something with this. I was thinking one, you see how it works now? Awesome. Very good. I was thinking one way that we could do this would be to grab a curved tube brush and just kind of wrap it around maybe and see how that looks. I would do something relatively simple. We don't need a ton of curves. Let's just play around here and see what we can do. You have to be careful because you can actually adjust a curve on the opposite side of your mesh if you're still able to edit that, which is a pretty annoying feature. Whoa, see, look, it did it right there. It's annoying. Okay. Alright, so we'll just stop it right there. Maybe increase the size a lot. Maybe not that much. Maybe something like that. If you just use the intensity on your curves, it flattens them to the mesh. So we could actually make this a lot flatter. And then increase our draw size to kind of get these to stick a little bit closer together. Maybe something like that. And then from there we can inflate this. Let's try, so we can inflate it first. It's gonna make it a little bit too big though. So let's deformation inflate. Start to get our curve going on here, our curl. Maybe scale down a little. Inflate more. Maybe something like this, with some adjustments, of course. I definitely think that's a possible direction. Let's maybe hide that. And then maybe something with like a cap on the end of this, and we can make it look a little bit better. I don't actually like the flat shape that we ended up doing there. I would prefer to keep it more rounded. So let's do a second take on that and just see if we can get that to look a little bit more appealing. Delete lower and delete hidden. I have to delete my subdivs if I want to use delete hidden. Just a curved tube snap here. Maybe we'll just add in some additional strokes. And we might be able to make a couple different versions of an insert mesh brush for this. You can actually, depending on what your geometry is looking like, you can actually get it to spiral up and follow your topology a little bit. So I wouldn't have to manually do this necessarily for every stroke of our hair. We're just doing it once so that we can kind of see what this is. Whoops, gonna look like. And we've gotten a little loose in some areas, but we can adjust that without any problems with our move brush and maybe some back face masking or something. It's mainly the cap here. Come on, snap. It's mainly this area that I want to be nice and thick here on the end. Not sure what happened there. Started to really thin out there, back towards the start, annoyingly so. So this is another idea that I had. The first being the just kind of manually going through on these shapes and kind of sculpting some different forms, which I think can definitely work, and it might lend itself a little bit better to that stylized look that we're going for. But with something like this, we can maybe get some more interesting shapes and something that's a little bit more clean and concentric. I don't like how thin that ended up getting. Strange that that happened. Something like that. Let's hide that one. So maybe something like this with an end cap on it. Let's inflate it a little bit. And then, at the tip we can kind of blend this in some, have that taper away. I don't know, I don't think I like this very much. I think it might be better to just kind of hand sculpt everything. And then for adding a cap, there's a lot of different ways we could do that. I think I'm just gonna really quickly throw a sphere right here. Something quick, just so we can get a feel for this, how it's coming together. I'll actually remesh this so that I can clean up just that end piece. I don't know. I don't think I'm liking this too much. What do you guys think? Maybe with some additional sculpting on top of it, we can make it look really nice. I think kind of having the blocky hair might look a little bit more on character with our concept. Martin says you could try to increase edges on the low poly spiral. Yeah, I could. I can maybe step back and look at that. Delete that. So let me duplicate, undo a bunch of stuff. And delete. So what Martin is saying is that you could come in here and do a crease edge loop, depending on how well these edge loops are kind of lined up, and whoops, get some nice creasing going on there. Maybe even some additional form. Probably just one, and if we were doing something like that, it's probably better if we just do, instead of a crease, do a simple bevel So it gives it some more form, but it's a little bit more rounded, something like that. We'll kind of keep moving forward with this piece though, real quick. Finish this out. Something like this, maybe. Obviously, we would need a little bit more tweaking and cleanup to get it in a really nice place, but I don't know. It's not terrible. I could definitely see how it could work after some time improving it. I think that's a little bit more of a time investment than I am looking for, so I'm going to delete that. I think we're just going to go through and maybe do some more of this on individual hair pieces and just try to get a little bit of form. I don't want it to be as pushed as that spiral that we just had was. I want it to be something where we're, you know, also saving time and only sculpting on what's going to be visible. Whoops. Crease by normals. Could crease by normals as well. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna kind of come through here and hand sculpt it up. I think that is gonna be the way to go. Plus, I'm gonna have, you know, all the control working this way. But it probably is, honestly, I don't know if it's going to be the most labor intensive or not, just because the other way I'm probably going to have to end up, you know, re-sculpting a bunch of stuff just because they're so even, and I don't really want that. Another thing I can also do with this style that I've kind of started sculpting here is I can slice off different parts and polygroup them and really get some nice creases that way. So we can still play with creasing, but maybe just not exactly the way of you would think with like super low poly topology. So like that, and with a quick poly group, just throw that away. So I'm blocking out my mask with my mask lasso, my favorite masking tool, and then coming through afterwards with my mask pen. This is the back side of the hair, so not going to be seen on this strand. And we'll make one more group. It does not have to be super clean or perfect by any means. But what it does have to be is grouped. So I'm just remeshing with keep groups on. It'll give us 4 distinct polygroups here. Hopefully retain some of this form at 1K, which it has to some degree. make sure that what we did create is kind of visible there. I might get rid of that mark there. But then with this, I can come in with my ZModeler brush and crease or delete some edge loops if I want. So let's say, ooh, don't have a perfect edge loop here. That's unfortunate. Maybe this one. Nope. So some of this, just because ZRemesher topology isn't the most clean in the world, isn't going to always play nice for us, which is fine. I might be able to delete. Nope. Either one of these. Got a little bit of a issue down here. We got more than one issue, that's for sure. Crease, edge loop complete. Ooh, no, I'm not going to be able to crease that one. Not the traditional method. So instead of using the ZModeler brush to crease, we're just going to grab this polygroup, come on down into our geometry menu, go to crease, and just click on crease. These settings should all be fine. And then I'll grab this one and also crease. And then when I turn on my dynamic subdiv, you can kind of see how those creases are working. And I think with some more reshaping and cleanup, I think we can get that in a nice place. Playing with that a little bit more. Get that curl effect going on. Crease by polygroup is also another option as well. I don't like to, for the most part, dig down in my polygroups menu. This is nice and close. Polygroups, I'm like, oh, okay. Or actually, that might even be in the crease menu. Crease. Most of the options in here, like crease level, I believe, if I remember right, crease level decides how many subdivs you can create before it will no longer crease. Maximum number of subdivision levels at which the crease tags are effective. So this is like impossible. You're never going to have more than 15 subdivs. At least you shouldn't, I would hope. And the crease tolerance is for the angle of the polygons there. So really I just want a basic kind of crease that after the fact I can kind of come through and clean up like this. My smooth brush after subdividing a few times. Really it's not a finished thing. It's more of just kind of temporary so that I can sculpt on it more, and we ZRemesh so that we can get some easier to work with geometry. Clean it up as we kind of step back and forth between those subdivs and Dynamesh and everything else. And I'm just using what is essentially a combination of the Dam Standard and pinch brush here, the MAH Cut Mech brush. I believe it's available for free on ZBrush Central somewhere. They have a resources page with a bunch of different stuff on it. But I find this brush to be super helpful. So as we play with that more, we can kind of clean some stuff up, sculpt on it more, decide how soft we want some of these curls to be, or how tight we want them to be as we play with them more and more. Yeah, it's starting to get there. Kind of like this this method more so than what we were looking at before with creating the tubes of geometry. I think this definitely hits more within the style that we're looking for. And it still gives us kind of a nice termination point. I'm kind of happy with the way that's shaping up. I'd like to create one curl that will act as kind of our example for how we're going to do the rest of these. Clean up some of these lines. Starting to lose some of that as we come through here. Which is fine, we just need to soften it out, maybe fill that in a little. And play with that a little bit more. Alright. So that's shaping up pretty well there. We'll just do another Dynamesh on there. And the silhouette was kind of starting to change a little bit too much on me there. I need to move my light around so I can see a little bit better. And continue to just really clean this up as best as we can. I'm just trying to get it in a really nice place. I don't know, again, I'm kind of still playing around with how tight I want to make these curves, these creases here. I think we can definitely get some cool shapes though. The way we're headed. I can get some really nice tight lines, or I could, you know, go back through and soften a lot of this up. I'd rather kind of push it a little bit further though first, and then we can knock it back if we want. I like keeping things nice and tight. And this is all, you know, just to kind of figure out the exact look that we're going for. So I'm really kind of adding a bit of a strong plane between these. There's some stretching going on in there. It's fine. Quick little remesh. Lazy mouse loves to jump around. Cause all sorts of problems. So we're getting like this really nice kind of bevel through there, which is looking pretty cool. But again, like I said, we might end up just, you know, coming through here and smoothing all this out. I don't know yet. Kind of trying to take a step back and look at everything as a whole. If we have a lot of this stuff going on, it might be looking a little bit too busy if we do a ton of it. And right through here, this gets a little bit too busy for me, just in general, so I'm just gonna fill that out. All right. Polygroups have kind of stretched a little bit. I don't really need them too much. Really the only reason I would need polygroups at this point is to kind of create the, just to make sure I get a nice edge loop around here. So we'll maybe have just 2 polygroups. clean up that edge now that we've stretched it to hell and back. And like I said earlier, these don't have to be super clean, these groups here. Group that one, group that one. I'm just pressing Control W. It normally groups what you have masked, but because I don't have anything masked, it is only, it's polygrouping what's visible. Let's try a little bit lower. Whoops. To remesh that. Ooh, stream, what are you doing? Let's see. Martin says, looks great. Will you do retopo and what program do you use? Martin likes 3D Coat. No, I will not be doing retopo here. 1 second, and I'll show you. I have used 3D Coat for retopo though in the past. There we go. Alright. So that's kind of the... Come on, rotate around. Turn this all on. So that's kind of the look that we got going on for one strand of hair. And it still obviously needs to be cleaned up more. But in a much better place than we were a few minutes ago. Definitely a much better place than we were at the start of the stream. Alright, let me turn on Skin Shade 4, and do I have my poly paint anywhere? Yes. Alright. I just kind of want to see what this is looking like with our poly paint here. It's a little dark. Kind of want to lighten that up some. Maybe not quite that much. Let's try just real quick here. See what the difference here is in color. Alright, let's try this. Fill that in at 100%. So, Martin was asking, let's see, will you do retopo? No, I will not. This character that I'm working on is for Dylan Ekron's Stylized character sculpting class. And we do not do any retopo in that class. Maybe after the fact, you know, I could come back through and do some retopo. But my experience, my professional experience is for working on toys and life-size figures for stuff like amusement parks and museums. So most of the stuff that I do is purely sculptural here in ZBrush. So here's our body for maybe some people that have not seen before that are kind of just popping in. And we also have our head that we were just, you know, we've been looking at with our hair and everything else. But yeah, we've been working on the body a little bit on and off. We were working on the hands in our last video. And right now we're starting to work on our hair. The reason I do not have the head and the body on at the same time is because they are not aligned properly. I have the head in the basic kind of area here, but my body is being sculpted asymmetrically. Obviously it's in pose and everything else, so I'm sculpting that asymmetrically. I wanted to do that as a little bit more of a challenge, plus the pose of our character is pushed extremely far. And then the head is not on on the x-axis, so I have to, but it is facing forward perfectly. So I can still work on this symmetrically if I use local symmetry, which calculates the local symmetry point of whatever object you're working on, no matter where it is in your scene. So I can still kind of sculpt on this symmetrically, even though it is not, you know, directly on the x-axis. If I turn this off and still keep symmetry on, you'll see that my x-axis is actually somewhere over here, maybe like right about there. So you can see that extra, I'm not sure, there we go, now you can see that. So that's about where my x-axis is. So I'm working on this, again, asymmetrically, which is pretty tough, but we're making progress one day at a time. And continuing to work here on our hair next. But yeah, our hair's starting to get there. I think I saw something that said try clay polish. Try clay polish and hair. I think you just mean on the hair. Down here in the geometry palette, there's your little clay polish palette here, your sub palette. I actually hate the clay polish feature. I think it's awful. You can do some cool stuff with it, especially if you're trying to really crease up some edges. I'll click on it a few times here so you can kind of start to see how it really starts to define some of these edges. You do have to make sure, I'm not going to want them this tight probably, but you do have to make sure that when you use clay polish, this is just the default settings, which is fine. When you do use clay polish, make sure that you unmask after you're done using it, because it actually does mask your surface a little bit here. So if I tried to sculpt on this, you could maybe see where it's not kind of coming through. It's not wanting to affect that area where it is masked, so you would have to unmask. So you can get some cool effects with it, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of it though. Plus, we're probably not going to want these shapes to be quite that tight. So if I use this, I would use it initially and then maybe come through with a nice soft smooth brush using our alternative smooth method. You also can get some like artifacts and stretching when you use clay polish. You can probably adjust some of the settings so that you don't necessarily get that exact interaction, but for the most part I prefer to kind of just come through and clean up stuff by hand. But I don't know, play around with it. Maybe you can get some good results with some stuff that you're working on. Clay polish is kind of one of those, in my opinion, deprecated things. I think it has a kind of like shadow box. It has a very small use anymore. There's just way better ways to do that kind of thing. It is nice that it can kind of calculate your surface though on something that's high res and find those creased areas and maybe tighten them up for you. But you know, like I said, probably not quite as tight as we got from that. So maybe something a little bit closer to there. We can continue to work with the rest of our hair. I think that's kind of in a lot better place. We do just have a single strand completed, one clump. But hey, that's what this kind of stuff takes. It's a big time investment. I did not make that face in 1 hour, that's for sure. And I think, yeah, we're about at an hour. That was a good estimate. Trying to get that to line up a little bit nicer. Just trying to get that to follow the curve of the face as well. I think that's a kind of good place to keep that in right now. I'm getting annoyed by the dark material that I keep seeing through my color, so really quick here, I'm just gonna material fill object on these so that I can work in my clay material without things getting too dark on the face. Cool. All right, 1 second here. All right, so I think that's a good place for our kind of reference strand is what I'm going to call it. I will probably end up softening the forms in here even more, because I think if we have a lot of these really hard lines and transitions in here in every single strand, it's going to get really noisy. And as those kind of start to blend together, I think it's going to get pretty messy. So I will probably not smooth this yet and do anything too crazy on it, but I'm just going to kind of leave it where it is now, and we can kind of look at another strand here, or if you guys want, I can kind of go back to our hands. I do need to do a little bit more work on those, but I'm just going to kind of keep going on the hair, and if anybody has any specific questions or anything, we can look at that. But until then, let's look at some more hair and kind of how we can clean this up. I'm going to be focusing mainly on the stuff in the front because the stuff in the back won't be seen, and I mean it'll be seen maybe in like a turntable or something, but for the most part it will not be seen, and I can do a little bit less detailing back there in terms of I wouldn't have to make it quite as nice as I've made this first strand. So we got one here. I'm just going to start off by dynameshing, reforming a little bit. You can see all the warble we got going on this one side. So we got to pay attention to our big shapes first. I'm looking at my reference as well, just trying to get a read on kind of how this needs to lay with the rest of the hair. Although this reference is from a singular angle and the hair is not very well defined, so there's definitely a lot of designing that needs to be done in terms of that. Stand to maybe push this a little bit more, trying to get that stretched out. And look at Z-remeshing. Let's see. Martin says the hair on the 2D concept looks a little like stylized rocks. Yes, yes. So let's see here. Real quick, I'll load in. Or actually, I don't need to load in the image. I'm not going to do that. We'll just go over here. It's a concept by D. Dino. So the problem with the concept overall is that it's pushed just really far in a lot of different ways. For example, and a lot of it's done, you know, it's done on purpose. It's to either push the silhouette or push some shape in an interesting way. For example, the legs, or actually let me do this. The legs are different shapes, the arms are different shapes. If I zoom in on the hand here, you can see that the knuckles are just incredibly warped and pushed in this really kind of interesting way, but I'm not going to push them that much. And then if you look at the other hand, this is kind of what we were looking at in our last stream. We have this single kind of hit here, the single knuckle hit, and then it's just this rounded sausage that we got going on, so that's fun. And the silhouette is kind of pushed really far here. This is stretched super far for the thumb. So a lot of this stuff isn't possible. It's just kind of trying to find that balance. Same thing, I would say, with the hair. Stylized rocks, that's a funny way to interpret it for sure. But I can definitely see kind of the... I know that she has curly hair in the movie, and I can definitely see, you know, where he has kind of slightly indicated some of this and tried to get that across. So here it's kind of a little haphazard, kind of going different directions. With this front piece, it's not really even curly hair, so I've tried to replicate that. Some of the stuff up here, you know, a little bit different. So, you know, I'm trying to find the in-between where I can, you know, still get it to look like curly hair and make it look good, while also staying as true to the concept as possible. If we want to go for something a little bit more blocky though, that'll be totally fine. That'll be really easy to do because these forms that we've built up, yeah, it's super clean, but it's also super easy to get rid of most of that. Even if we want to completely knock it back down, which I don't think is going to be necessary at all. I think we can keep a lot of this. But if we want to knock some of it down and smooth it out, get it a little bit more uniform, that is definitely an option too, to consider. But yeah, let's kind of keep going with what we're building up here. You can also see the indication of a little bit of that spiral there, kind of wrapping around. It's a little bit kind of a weird cutoff choice there, but it's all for the sake of the 2D silhouette. 2D artists like to cheat, if you guys don't know. So we have to find ways where we can either cheat similarly in 3D or just make it work. Mainly it's just making it work from every angle. It's the hard part of 3D, right? Always a challenge. And in a lot of these, I don't really need to do a ton of sculpting. I don't need to get, you know, 3 individual clean strokes through here. I can just do 1 in some of these and, you know, none in others, like on the back of the head. We'll play with it. Try to save us some headache. So I'm going to try using my sharp soft brush here a little bit. And I'm just using this brush. It's pretty similar to the damn standard brush. It's just a little bit softer. Play with this. Try to start blocking out our spiral. And then just kind of take a step back and see how that's looking. And kind of terminate that up towards the top. Clean that up some more and play with it. This one I want to be still visible, so I'm trying to not cut that off completely. It might not be visible from the front though. We'll see. A little bit. Just ever so slightly sticking out there, but yeah. The basic workflow we've kind of got figured out, so now we should be able to do this a little bit faster than our initial one there, as we played with a lot of different stuff. Getting a real Yoshi vibe on this music. What are we listening to? Robo Ballad, Zircon. Zircon's got some cool stuff. I've heard their work before on here. Let's go ahead and mask off what we've got so far. Actually, I'm not going to mask it. I'm just going to hide it because I want to make this central piece its own individual poly group. I pretty much always keep double on for everything that I'm working on. If I could keep that on by default, that would be super awesome, but to my knowledge, there's not a way to do that. Unfortunately. It's okay, it's not a big deal. That's why I got it in my hotkey menu, so I can clean that up. Let's change my options really quick for the stuff that I can't set by default. And unfortunately, there are quite a few things that you can't set by default in ZBrush. But the the help of a custom menu does make that a little bit easier on you. Just kind of trying to clean up that curve a little bit more. Let's see how that's wrapping around. I'm not trying to get the cleanest selection in the world. I'm just trying to get something that is practical, something that works. I do want to fix that though. So step one, kind of block out our strokes here for our shape. See how that's looking kind of big picture mode by zooming out and seeing how everything's looking together for the hair. And then kind of go through and separate these pieces out into a couple poly groups. Group visible. There we go. Martin is asking if we should use panel loops before Z remeshing. You can do that if you want to get some additional control over the tightness in there. So if you guys aren't familiar with panel loops, it's in your edge loop menu here. I don't use panel loops super often, but you can use edge loop to kind of clean up. You can kind of see how dirty this stuff is, but if we click on group loops or even panel loops, group loops would probably be a little bit better here. But we need to hide some stuff. Sorry, delete our subdiv and then activate panel loops. So that'll kind of, or group loops, that'll kind of clean that up. It'll also add some additional loops in there. Panel loops, kind of the same thing, but it adds some thickness. I don't really like using panel loops for this kind of thing. If I'm going to use panel loops, it'll be on hard surface stuff. Martin was asking if we should be using this. I would say no, just because if you go into Z remesher, keep groups on, 1K should probably be fine. It's going to still put in a pretty nice edge loop, or it should put in a pretty nice edge loop with the loops that I've created with this poly group here. The only place where it will struggle is back here where it gets a little crazy, which is fine. I don't need a super clean edge loop. What I need is just a decently clean separation between these two pieces. And you can see in some areas it's kind of created additional poly groups, which is fine. It's not a big deal. Can even hide that and maybe run it again. Just to help maybe clean that up a little bit more. And you can see there we have a more clean edge loop. But when you do Z remesh, you have to keep in mind that you start to lose volume each time you do it. So just be aware of that. I don't think we've lost enough for it to be a problem here. So 1K is probably even too many polygons for what we were just trying to accomplish. No worries though. I think it's fine. Just do a crease in there and start cleaning this up. So even with that kind of level, you know, it's gotten to a decent place. You know, we could call this done maybe after some slight cleanup in some of these areas and move on to another one. But with just those quick little Z remesh with groups turned on, it can be really helpful to get some pretty clean shapes out of that. Alright, so let's see here. In this piece, I kind of took the time to really bevel these edges out using some pinch brushes and my my MAH cut neck brush. This time, I think we're not going to sit here and kind of meticulously bevel every edge, but I think we're just going to do a little bit of cleanup. and then move on to some more. We have our work cut out for us. We got a lot of hair to play with. And I like to keep things around the same level of finished look as I go. I don't want to get too far on any one piece here and then neglect the others. Kind of the same mindset when I'm working on characters. I don't know if you guys watching do this, but for the most part, I like to keep things around the same level of finish. So if I'm working on the face for a long time and I neglect the body, I get to a place where the head looks good, but then the body looks just like a big old garbage can. It requires a lot more cleanup than I want to do. I tend to jump around a lot and keep things around the same level of finish. So this edge is creased through here, so it's trying to kind of clean that up and figure out what it is that we want it to do. But now that we're at a point where we're, you know, working with subdivs here, we can kind of control those edges a little bit more. Essentially what a crease is, the way it's interpreted by the software, Maya, Max, and all that, they pretty much all do the same thing. If we undo here and zoom in. In ZBrush, it kind of defines it with this kind of thick line. It kind of has this outline on it, and that's because that's essentially what a crease is. Let me zoom out here. Duplicate, delete higher, Z modeler. So if I come here and I crease this edge loop, it puts that dotted line around that, and that's just saying, hey, I'm going to interpret this as a double beveled edge, essentially. So that edge is creased, and instead let's come in here and we'll go to bevel, edge loop complete, and we'll add in some additional geometry, some additional edge loops. So this is just 2, and you can kind of see what that looks like as we wrap around here. A little bit easier to see from this angle. So the crease is super tight there. It's a really hard edge. This is a little bit softer. We add in an additional bevel there. It's not quite even, but that'll make it even tighter of a transition, and it's pretty much the equivalent to a crease there. So that's kind of how the software is interpreting that in a way. You can kind of think of it that way. There are some different options you can do with creases to kind of control how strong they are as well. But for our purposes, we're just using creases, subdividing up, and then going through and kind of resculpting over them. So having that really hard edge at first is totally fine. It just gives us the opportunity to go through and trim up some stuff with our actual trim dynamic brush, soften some edges with our smooth brush, and kind of keep going from there. But yeah, if you're trying to kind of work your shape, you can either use creases. I like to use bevels a lot for different stuff with the Z modeler brush if I don't want to get quite as tight of a shape in there. Bevels are pretty fun to play with. And really, if you're working in hard surface stuff and you want to make it look good, the secret is to just bevel every single edge. I'm not even kidding. I'm kind of kidding, but it's not too far from the truth. So a little bit of cleanup to some of these forms. Coming around the edges here. I'm mainly just using my trim dynamic brush and a very gentle smooth. When I am smoothing, I'm mainly using the alternative smooth, but I'm also pressing very lightly with my pen. It's very easy to destroy your form with your smooth brush, just in a single stroke. None of that's ever seen, so I don't need to sit there and play with it forever. I don't really like the transition that we have going on here between these creased edges. So I think a little bit of some softening here. Just to get a little bit more edge control. This is kind of killing my ears, so let's go to the next song. Zircon. Zircon's got some cool stuff. Take a step back, kind of see how that's shaping up with everything else here. Our two hair strands that we've carved up a little so far. So I'm going to say that that's a good place for that one, and we can kind of return to it later as we begin moving around and working on more. This is the kind of stuff that I'm going to really want to hone in on in here. Filling in a lot of these gaps. The main way that I plan on doing that is kind of coming in through, let's grab our select rectangle, grab these three pieces, and then within these areas I'm going to most likely just kind of take a big move brush with backface masking and start to really fill in that form so that when you look in there with everything else, it's all kind of I don't want you to ever be able to see her head showing through there. So kind of just thickening up those gaps. It's going to be one of the major things that we look at here. And there are quite a few of those that I've already cleaned up, but there are still some areas like around here. Just kind of depends on the angle that you're looking at everything from. Hair is a lot of work. It can be. Let's see. I think I'm gonna do one more of these, and then I am gonna have to bounce on out of here. So if you guys have any more questions before all that, please post it in the chat, and I will do my best to answer. Or at least pretend to know what I am talking about. Very good at that. Alright, let's Dynamesh. Thought I had groups turned on to there for some reason. Start again. Whoops, got backface masking on. Just in the Dynamesh phase here. At first, cleaning up our forms, just getting a nice silhouette. Whoops. Could even go a little bit lower here on the Dynamesh. So I'm checking this from every possible angle. Just kind of seeing how that's shaping up. Thinking about straights versus curves. Thinking about how this is transitioning to the tip. I want to again avoid those flats to this kind of weird bulbous curve that we're seeing on the edge here. So adjust the silhouette for that. All this stuff, all these little things really add up pretty quick. If I really want to get a good end cap here, a way that I might be able to do that is by slicing off the geometry there with a slice curve temporarily and Z-remeshing it just to get maybe a little bit tighter there, force it to give us some edge loops, and then even come through here and delete some of this stuff where we don't want this additional form. So that actually works pretty well. Down here, this edge loop could stand to move around some, but I think that actually worked better than I was thinking it would. Which is always nice. It's rare that that kind of happens in ZBrush. helping to flatten that out. And there we go. Get that to a nice place. Then we can kind of start blocking out one of our curls. I'm just going to do a single line, single stroke through here. I also want to somewhat vary the direction of my curls. So here on this piece I'm coming down at this angle. On these ones I'm coming down at this angle. So I might want to, you know, swap up that angle once more. Something like that. And I can even polygroup that if I want to get a decent outline for myself. It's nice if you do that, turn off line on your poly frame, and then you can kind of come through and trace that line. For the most part though, I'll just kind of toggle it on and off if I need it. But I just kind of wanted to get a general idea of how I wanted to make that stroke. And it only really needs to be in the front. I don't need to wrap it around too much, because all that's hidden in the back. And our little cinnamon roll here is about all you can see from the front. It's starting to get a little bit strong. What do you think about having a bit more variation on the lengths on the back of the head? Parentheses, on the back of the head. Absolutely. As we kind of go through each strand of hair here, even on the sides of the head here, we're going to add in additional variation. I was trying to do that earlier when we were starting on the hair, but I think it's just going to be better to go through one at a time. Try to get quite a bit more variation. Specifically in size is where I'm more concerned. Length will be really easy to do, but as I resize up some of these, and probably don't want to get much more smaller than something like this piece over here. That's definitely about the smallest I would want to go, especially if I print this later. I would like to keep everything within a pretty minimum thickness of, you know, definitely larger than 5 millimeters, which is kind of the 3 to 5 is like the absolute minimum that you could expect out of SLA or something. SLA or maybe even FDM, but yes, absolutely. As I go through here one at a time, I'll be re-looking at that. These on the front though, they're kind of already set up in a decent place, which is why I'm trying to hit these first. Because the ones in the back are going to take a little bit more thought as I kind of hit those again. Can never remember. Let me see something. It doesn't. Unfortunately, the mask lasso doesn't work with back face masking. It would be really cool if it did. The mask pen does, though, so if you're working on geometry that's really thin, you want to be careful with masking or even sculpting. For the most part, I keep most of my brushes with back face masking on, so if I like toggle through all my brushes here, they pretty much, for the most part, all have back face masking on. My pinch brush does not. Just makes it a little bit easier when working on geometry that's really tight. This is not super tight though, so this is totally fine to work on it without it. You cannot use Sculptress Pro with back face masking on either, which is unfortunate. You can use it actually, but they disabled it in the most recent release because it was causing a lot of crashes. and there's a lot of edge cases where it will not work. So they ended up just kind of disabling it altogether. Hopefully in a future release we can get it. I'd be a lot more likely to use it then. See how that shapes up. So for something like this, we might even be able to control those really hard edges. Get rid of these and have kind of our bevel already in here if we crease all three of these edges. So crease, edge loop complete. Come through here. Ooh, last one. Last one didn't play nice. Control-Shift-S and Control-Shift-X are how you shrink and grow these selections. Which is very handy for doing something like this, hiding all of that, and then going back into our crease menu, crease, and get all that creased up for us. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to delete this edge. I'm going to guess not, just because of the way that was connecting back there. You have to be careful when you do stuff like that. I kind of just randomly do it and test it and see how hard I can break stuff. But ZModeler is very finicky, especially if you're working with symmetry. We are not working with symmetry though, so we're kind of good in that regard. But if you're working with symmetry, ZRemesher is not going to be your friend. You'll get a lot of crashes on a lot of different operations. So there's kind of the extreme case of how strong we can get that creasing to take place before even sculpting over it at all. That's definitely, you know, harder than I'm going to want. With some really simple cleanup. A couple smooth strokes. None of this is going to be seen. I just want to make sure that that is the case back here. That falls back through there. And up here. And I'm using, to toggle all this stuff on and off so fast, I'm using solo mode over here. I just have that set to a hotkey. I know that can sometimes get confusing for people that are just popping in here and what the hell's going on. But, let's see here. Need to sleep, once again, great work. Thank you, Martin, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming in and chatting. And thank you to everybody else as well. I think that's going to be a good place for us to stop, since we've kind of figured out what we want to do with our hair. So we kind of alternate all these strokes, and I think things are getting to a good place here. And one more quick save. I know I just quick saved, but it's a habit. I have to do it. I have to make sure, because it's a really crappy feeling when you do lose that stuff. My quick save settings, I think, are set to 20 minutes. You can modify your quick save settings to happen at different intervals. I think the default is 15 minutes. The restoration, you might as well set this to like 600 because it really doesn't matter. I have never had ZBrush crash on me while it was sitting unattended. Also the fact that if you even make a camera movement, it then enters what is called the maximum duration. So the restoration is almost kind of a useless slider in my head, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, good place to stop. Thank you again for coming in, guys. Again, I will mention D Dino, the concept artist, really cool guy. Check him out in the link below in the description. Go give him a follow on ArtStation. He absolutely deserves it. He's got some really cool stuff. As well as, if you enjoy some of my free content, go check out some of the paid stuff, like my most recent ZBrush course, as well as my new mentorships, ZBrush mentorship program that I'm offering. There's a lot more info in there, and maybe I can talk a little bit more about that in the next live stream and answer some questions. But yeah, if you like my free stuff, if you like my live stream, you'll definitely like the paid content as well, a lot higher quality. So thank you guys, appreciate you, and I will see you guys in the next stream, hopefully tomorrow. You guys have a great rest of your day. with that, toodaloo.